me. You usually share that observation with those around you. Subconsciously, you're trying to reassure yourself. This psychological shift signals stigma, placing someone in a different imaginary category based on characteristics you see as undesirable and threatening to your feelings of security. So be kind when you hear of other struggles. Express empathy and be your kids are listening to you. I'll see you on the Dr. Nurse
사연을 하있다. 사연아 스팀 사연을 하있다. 어?
샤워하다니.
뭐다 그러죠. 맞아 그러진 않아. 스팀은
debut week here on American Family Radio. Hey, Dr. Peck, welcome back to the Corp.
Hey, Walker, thanks so much for having me back.
Well, I know you're going to need the rest after this week. You've been blowing and going with your new show. And I know you've been making the rounds on some of our other shows as well, along with some of your travel. But how would you, what would your assessment be of your show the first week?
Oh, it's gone so great. And you know, I've said on every show, the American Family Radio listeners have been so gracious to welcome me into the family. I've said it before to you, where I bring the casserole. You know, I just feel like one of the bunch, and it has gone so well. And even yesterday, we had a show with Wendy Blight, who's an attorney and a Bible study author, and it was so great. As soon as that show was over, I got so many messages from people just in tears. So the way that her hope had resonated with everyone, and so I've just been hearing from listeners all over, and I could not be more happy about it.
That's great. And of course, I've been listening to, and it's just a refreshing new show, and it's hopefully going to, and prayerfully going to provide a lot of wisdom and counsel to our audience out there, those parents and grandparents, and those who have a role in influencing our young people. It is such a high duty and important calling, especially in this time, in this nation. The family just needs to be strengthened. So hopefully that's what will be done through that program. Hey, Dr. Peck, I do want to cover a few topics, a few very relevant topics for our audience. So the first one being, you mentioned this, I believe the last time you were on, you mentioned at least in passing, but unfortunately, birth control is, according to what you've reported and others, is going over the counter in the next few months. Let's talk about that and bring us up to speed.
Sure. So about 3 months ago, the FDA announced that Opill, which is an oral contraceptive available used to only by prescription for the past 50 years, it is a pretty well-established medication. It is going to be sold over the counter. Now, this isn't yet. It's likely going to be available in early 2024. There is not a specific date yet, but parents need to know about this because the FDA did not put any age restriction on that over-the-counter purchase. So this means teens can purchase it. So here's some facts about it. It's a mini pill. It contains progestin only. That's a kind of safer version of oral contraceptive, so it does have fewer side effects than a traditional combination pill. But there are contraindications and precautions. So if kids have heart disease or diabetes or blood clots or migraines or seizures or other things that kids have, this can be a very dangerous medication. Now, the law made at the FDA says that there has to be a pharmacist on duty to answer any questions that someone might have, but I highly doubt that teens are going to line up behind the counter to the pharmacist and say, hey, I have some questions about this. Now, the Catholic Church has actually expressed some concerns about carcinogenic risks and delay in diagnosis of cancer and sexually transmitted infections, actually. And I'm concerned about exploitation by traffickers. You know, a lot of the work that I do as a nurse is in human trafficking, and I think that traffickers will do this. Now, other groups advocating against abortion, other pro-life groups, they've kind of kept quiet about it and refrained from critique, hoping that it decreases abortion demand. And there's no set price yet, but this is something that parents need to be talking to their teens about.
Yeah, and the elephant in the room, and you're hitting on it here, is that we're making something available that is aimed at preventing pregnancy and conception, and we're doing so to people of all ages, especially underage, and we're doing it over the counter with no prescription. And so the elephant in the room, I guess is what I'm getting at, is that we're making it easier, quote unquote easier, for people to have out of wedlock and out of marriage sex, premarital sex, without any after effects, if you will. I don't want to say consequences, but pregnancy is a natural effect of sexual intercourse within the confines of marriage, which is how God designed it. But this is making it easier for young people to engage in promiscuous behavior without any type of after effect, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, you know, Walker, I'm a clinician. I see teenagers every day, and I've seen dozens and dozens of teens who have encountered unexpected pregnancy. And what I find across the board is that, in general, parents need to have more conversation with their kids about sex and the consequences of that. Now, abstinence is absolutely the only way to prevent you from getting pregnant or getting an infection outside of wedlock. And kids absolutely need to know that. But they have curiosity about a lot of things. And with the advent of the internet, there's so much information that they can get from peer-to-peer sharing. We need to expose our kids to some of this information. Now, a lot of parents say, oh, I don't want to tell my kids about this or that. You know, I don't want to give them ideas. Let me tell you, Walker, I talk to kids every day about this, and they have ideas, and they're really not good ideas.
Yeah.
We need, as parents, to give them good ideas and equip them with information and make sure that we're having that conversation with them so that they're equipped to say no to pressure that they're encountering.
Yeah, that's right. We need to be in the driver's seat, and the conversation needs to be on our terms and not on the terms of our children or the terms of those that have, instigated the conversation or the bad ideas. Let me ask you this, Dr. Peck. Of course, Halloween is a worldly, secular holiday, or a day that is, celebrated, and it's rooted in actually very dark roots, spiritually speaking. But nonetheless, many Americans do celebrate it. Some don't necessarily celebrate Halloween. Some have a fall festival or a fall gathering if they don't want to take part in officially Halloween. But nonetheless, it's prevalent. It's there. It's going to happen at the end of October. Talk about the dangers and what parents need to be on guard about when it comes to candy. Something as innocent as candy being handed out maybe at school or around the neighborhood. What do parents need to be on the lookout for?
Well, Walker, at the risk of being canceled by some of your listeners, I'll say it, skip Halloween, and because of my daughter being ill when she was little, we actually remember Christmas tree already. So we still gotta go through the Christmas assemblies and hear that person that doesn't decorate on your Thanksgiving cupcakes. And around this time of year, I start to hear a lot of fear about fentanyl, especially in Halloween candy, whether you get that from participating in Halloween or fall festival, just in the general population. Now, kids share kills about 1,000 teens a year, but those kinds of strategies are not going to resonate. It really needs to be relationship-based strategies. And so especially in going other places, I know a lot of parents who will, just kind of go against their gut and think, oh, I don't know if I should drop them off there or not. If that feeling is inside of you, don't be afraid to be the parent and just to say, I don't feel like this is right for you, but offer them an alternative. Say, I don't feel comfortable with you going over there, but would you like to invite some friends here, or would you like to have some friends, go do this activity? That would be really helpful. The other thing that I advise parents to do is to have a code word for teens to use during an emergency. So, for example, it could be an emoji, or it could be just a simple word like apple. And if you text that to the parents, they will come pick you up any place, anytime, with no questions asked until the next morning. When emotions have pulled. Because sometimes when teens find themselves in a situation over their head, they didn't know there was going to be drinking here. They didn't know that people were going to be engaging in behavior that they know is not to their standard. If you call the parents and say, hey, Mom, I need you to come pick me up. Why? What's wrong? Well, I just don't feel right about what's happening here. Why? What's happening? Well, is there drinking?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, who's drinking? But if you just call and say apple, like, okay, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and be the out for your kid.
Absolutely. Hey, Dr. Peck, thank you so much for your program. This is the first week, and you'll be back on the air Monday at 2 p.m. Central. What's maybe one or two things you have on your radar next week that you want to talk to our audience about?
Well, I was really excited actually about the show that we did just recently with Christy Boulware talking about mental health. We are going to be talking to Liz Dooley, who's a Bible study leader. We'll talk about how does the Old Testament, how do we make that come to life for our kids. We're going to be talking about social media. I mean, there's just really so much that we're going to talk about in holistic health. Make sure you tune in. I don't want you to miss a thing.
All right. Hey, Jessica, thanks so much for joining the program, and we look forward to hearing you next week.
Hey, thanks so much, Walker. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jessica. That's Dr. Jessica Peck. She's host of the Dr. Nurse Mama Show here on American Family Radio, 2 p.m. Central each weekday. She's also a Baylor professor and a pediatric nurse practitioner, amongst many things on her resume. So we're glad to have her as part of the American Family Radio family here on AFR. You can check out our podcast at afr.net or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, that's the Dr. Nurse Mama Show here on American Family Radio. Well, jumping back into some of the news items that I want to make sure we get to, I do have one more clip for this segment. I want you to listen to a CNN analyst admitting that there's really no good way to ensure that Hamas won't steal aid, humanitarian aid, coming into Gaza. That's a truth we must live with. Clip one.
With me now, CNN's Das Gold and Colonel Cedric Layton. Just in hearing what he had to say about the conditions, really, of being in compliance or going along with what President Biden has said, the conditions about hostages being released, the ideas of how to ensure that the aid is not going to be essentially taken and siphoned off by Hamas. Is it realistic to think that could actually be a condition that could be met before aid gets there?
Well, I think it's possible, but there's no peacekeeping mechanism. There are no troops on the ground to keep anybody away from these stores. Any mechanism to prevent Hamas from going after these things. So it's a bit touchy, and I think because there are no mechanisms of enforcement, I think it's going to be a bit of a problem, Laura.
So that's a CNN analyst, and by the way, there's pretty broad agreement on some various viewpoints on what's going on in Israel amongst the political spectrum or the ideological spectrum. But that's a CNN analyst when questioned, like, hey, is there any way to get foreign aid and humanitarian aid and supplies into Gaza without it falling into the hands of Hamas? And he basically says, no, that's unrealistic to do so. He said there's no good way to ensure Hamas won't steal the aid. That's something that the Israelis and the U.S. and our allies are going to have to come to grips with. And here's trouble as a nation, as a people, working through. And I'm not talking about the pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers on college campuses in New York City. I'm not talking to that group, because they're gone. All right, they want death to the Jews. They've already said they want to gas the Jews. They want to go back to the Nazi era. They want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. So I'm not talking to them. All right, but I'm talking to those of us who have been kind of reasoning through what this looks like. What does a ground invasion in Gaza look like? How do you avoid innocents dying, or how do you minimize civilian casualties? Here's what we need to come to grips with.
風邪ひってるかな、
There's nothing good about this situation.
風邪ひってるか
With
ね、
some situations in life and with the
お父さん、
you can look at it and
風邪ひってるかね、
here's some pros and here's some cons.
風邪ひってるかね、冷たい空気いってるかね。
言ってないよ。言ってないもん。暑いもん。
Civilians slaughtered by the terrorists, and the presumed invasion of Gaza to kill Hamas. There's nothing good that's going to come out of this. The only thing good that can come out of this is if we minimize civilian casualties and wipe Hamas off the face of the earth.
What does the American Family Association stand for? We believe that our ministry, as well as everything in the heavens and on earth, belongs to God, and our work is that of a trusted manager. These values and more are part of our mission to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of our culture. We also support the church. We want to be a leading organization in
ceasefire peace deal with the Hamas terrorists. But Israel, I really think they're serious this time. This was kind of their 9/11. They were caught off guard. A lot of women and children have been harmed, and they're done with this. I know they have been at odds with Palestinians for a very long time, certainly longer than we've been on this earth, longer than America has been a country. But I think they're really done with it at this point, and they're ready to just finally make an end to this. Yeah, I agree with that assessment.
시조리죠.
By many outlets, which I've talked about multiple times.
시조리죠. 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 기동한테.今じゃ丈夫だから。いいよ、お父さん。お疲れ様。お疲れ様。終わったから。今日は。